Ma'am, this isn't a parent-teacher meeting, and quite frankly, I don't have time for this, Principal Marcus Whitfield said, not bothering to look up from the file in his hands. His voice echoed sharply through the hallway outside his office, loud enough for two passing teachers to glance uncomfortably in their direction. Evelyn Carter stood at the threshold, still holding her purse tightly against her side. You are called because your son showed a lack of discipline, and instead of addressing that, you're here dressed like you just came from a grocery store. Do you even take this seriously? She blinked, stunned. Not by the volume, but by the sheer contempt in his tone. I came as soon as I could, Mr. Whitfield. I just got off work, she said softly. And what is it that you do, Miss Carter? He asked with exaggerated politeness, finally lifting his eyes. I clean offices. Part-time. He smirked.
Right.
That tracks. Then, leaning back in his leather chair, he folded his arms. This school is a place of order. Of standards. And your son, much like yourself, seems to struggle with both. Evelyn's lips trembled slightly, but she stood her ground. My son is a good boy. He doesn't disrespect anyone. Marcus cut her off with a scoff. He talks back, questions authority, and acts like he runs the place. Sound familiar? Evelyn blinked again. I don't understand what. Of course you don't, he interrupted sharply. Because people like you never do. You people think rules are optional. You raise your kids to believe they're owed something. She froze. The air between them thickened with a silence far more violent than shouting. You may not like what I'm saying, he continued, standing up slowly, but someone needs to say it. He will not succeed in this world with that attitude. And neither will you if you keep pretending that decency can be taught by example when the example is this. He gestured at her entire body. Her clothes. Her shoes. Her posture. Evelyn's jaw clenched. I came here to understand what happened with my son, not to be insulted. Oh, you misunderstand, Marcus said, stepping around his desk. This isn't about understanding. This is about consequences. And if you're not prepared to take responsibility for how your son behaves, then you're no better than the behavior itself. A group of students walked by outside the office window. One of them recognized Evelyn and hesitated, watching as the principal gestured toward the door. You may leave now, he said coldly, or I'll have security escort you. We don't need disruptions in front of impressionable students. Evelyn's hands tightened around her purse, her mouth parted in disbelief. But she didn't argue. She turned, slowly, her shoes echoing against the tiled floor, and walked down the hallway, the weight of a humiliation she had carried before, but never quite like this. Not in front of so many eyes. Not for simply being who she was. Not for daring to show up. Unbelievable, Marcus muttered behind her, loud enough for her to hear. The audacity. The next morning, the Lincoln Ridge High School parking lot shimmered under the Texas sun, students dragging their backpacks with half-closed eyes, unaware that the day ahead would rewrite the unspoken rules of their world. Inside the administrative wing, Principal Whitfield sipped his coffee smugly, already boasting to Vice Principal Green about putting that woman in her place. They come in here demanding respect, he said, brushing a speck of lint from his blazer, without even understanding what respect is. Meanwhile, in a quiet suburb of Houston, Evelyn Carter sat silently at her kitchen table, stirring a spoon in her cup without drinking, the events of the previous day playing on loop in her mind. She hadn't told Jonathan. Not yet. He called every night, without fail, but she hadn't wanted to burden him. Not after everything he built. But the moment came faster than she expected. That afternoon, her son's voice rang with concern through the speakerphone. Mom, you okay? You sound tired. She hesitated, then lied gently. Just one of those days. Jonathan paused. Did something happen with Caleb? She stayed silent for half a beat too long. That's when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She opened it. A video. She watched herself on screen, standing in that hallway, absorbing every insult with the poise of someone who had no other choice. The voice behind the camera whispered, "This isn't right." She forwarded it to Jonathan without a word. For 10 long minutes, he didn't reply. Then the phone rang. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was calm but strained. "I didn't want to cause you trouble," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've already fought too many battles." "Mom," Jonathan said, "you're the reason I know how to fight." The next morning at Lincoln Ridge, just as the third period bell rang, the roar of spinning blades shattered the quiet. Books dropped. Students ran to the windows. A black and silver helicopter circled once before descending onto the football field. Dust exploded in every direction. Teachers panicked. The office buzzed with calls to local authorities. Marcus Whitfield rushed outside, shouting at staff to control the students. But when the helicopter doors opened and Jonathan Carter stepped out, sharp suit, unreadable expression, flanked by 3 legal representatives, the chaos froze. "Who is that?" a student whispered. Another replied, eyes wide, "I think that's the guy from the Forbes list." As Jonathan walked across the field, each step measured. A name echoed in Marcus's mind like a ghost rising from the past. Carter. Not just the woman from yesterday. Not just the boy in question. Carter. He felt his throat tighten. This wasn't a parent. This was someone bigger than the school. Bigger than the town. And he had just publicly humiliated the one person this man had spent his whole life protecting. Jonathan Carter didn't speak immediately. He stood at the center of the football field, his eyes scanning the growing crowd of students and faculty now gathering along the fences, drawn by the sound and spectacle. Cameras were already out. Phones lifted high. A moment was forming, and he knew it. Principal Whitfield approached cautiously, adjusting his tie and forcing a tight smile, as if he hadn't called security on Jonathan's mother less than 24 hours earlier. "Mr. Carter," he began, "this is quite a surprise. If I had known you were coming, you wouldn't have done anything differently," Jonathan interrupted, not raising his voice. "Let's not pretend." The air grew tense. One of the attorneys handed Marcus an envelope. "What is this?" the principal asked, frowning. "A formal notice," the lawyer replied. "Effective immediately. An investigation is being opened into misconduct and discriminatory practices at Lincoln Ridge High School." Marcus scoffed, clutching the papers. "This is outrageous. I treat all students equally." Jonathan's expression didn't change. "You don't even treat all parents equally." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "You humiliated my mother yesterday. In front of staff. Students. You didn't speak to her. You spoke down to her. Your mother was confrontational. She was respectful." Jonathan snapped, a steel edge finally rising in his voice. "More respectful than you deserved. I know. Because I watched the video. Every second." He stepped closer. "And I remember that hallway. I remember your voice." Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" Jonathan looked him directly in the eye. "You were the assistant principal here when I was a student. I was 12. My mom worked 3 jobs. I wore hand-me-down clothes. One day, I came in late after walking 2 miles in the rain. You made me mop the cafeteria in front of the other kids. Told me maybe then I'd learn responsibility." Murmurs rippled through the nearby students. Jonathan's voice remained steady. "I never forgot it. But I told myself that maybe you'd grown. That maybe time had taught you empathy. Yesterday proved otherwise." Marcus's face had gone pale. "I didn't realize you never do," Jonathan said quietly. "Because people like you never have to." He turned to the crowd now fully formed behind the fence. Teachers, students, even local news vans arriving at the gates. "This school receives funding from the Carter Foundation," he continued. "We believed in providing opportunities to communities like Oakwood because we believed every student deserved dignity, no matter their background." He glanced at Marcus one last time. "But we don't invest in institutions that punish dignity, that mock humility, that silence the voices they should be lifting." He stepped back. "Effective today, our funding is frozen until new leadership is appointed and a full audit is completed. The board has already been informed." The silence that followed was thunderous. Whitfield stared at the ground, speechless. Students watched him, wide-eyed, the authority he wore like armor now in ruins. One brave student shouted from the fence, "Your mom's a legend." Others followed, clapping. Then more. Applause spread like wildfire. Evelyn Carter wasn't even on campus, but her name now echoed through the school she was once told to leave. Jonathan didn't smile. Not yet. There was still more to say. He turned back to the cameras, now recording live. "Let me be clear," he said. "This isn't revenge. This is accountability. There are thousands of Evelyn Carters out there. Parents who walk into buildings where they're treated like problems, not partners. And the people doing the judging are the ones who should be questioned." He let the silence breathe. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came here to protect what matters. And to honor the woman who taught me how to stand tall, even when the world wants you small." That afternoon, the once confident walls of Lincoln Ridge High School felt thinner, like the building itself was embarrassed. The faculty moved through the halls in whispers. Several teachers, who had quietly endured Marcus Whitfield's dismissive leadership for years, suddenly found their voices. A math teacher, Mr. Holloway, submitted a signed statement about Marcus ignoring reports of bullying against minority students. A guidance counselor admitted she'd been told to not escalate things unnecessarily when a Black parent requested extra academic support. The silence that once protected the system was breaking, fracture by fracture. Meanwhile, Marcus sat alone in his office, blinds drawn, the envelope from Carter's legal team still unopened on his desk. His phone buzzed with calls from district officials and board members, but he ignored them. The knock on the door was soft. He didn't respond. It opened anyway. Evelyn Carter stepped inside. She wore the same modest cardigan from the day before. No makeup. No entourage. Just calm. Marcus looked up, ashamed for the first time in years. "Mrs. Carter," he muttered, "you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she said, gently but firmly. He looked away. "Why are you here?" She walked slowly to the center of the room, placing her purse on a chair. "Because I needed you to see something." She pulled a photo from her wallet and placed it on his desk. It showed a young Jonathan, maybe 12, standing beside a science project at a school fair. Alone. No ribbons. No crowd. Just pride on his face. "He told me about the mop," she said. Marcus closed his eyes. "That day, I thought I was teaching him discipline." "No," she said, "you were teaching him shame." He flinched, but he didn't let it define him. "And neither did I." She leaned closer. "You've forgotten what education is supposed to be. You made power your compass. And somewhere along the way you stopped seeing children. You only saw problems." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Do you know why I never told him what happened yesterday?" she continued. "Because I didn't want to become the reason he stopped believing in dignity. But he found out anyway. And you know what he did?" She gestured toward the field outside. "He came here with grace. He stood where you tried to make him small and made himself heard. Not by force, but with truth. That's the man you tried to break." Her voice cracked for the first time. "That's my son." Marcus lowered his head. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," she said, "because this isn't about you." Then she turned, picked up her purse, and walked out without another word. Outside, students lingered on the lawn, still processing the day's events. Some asked questions. Others just stood quietly. Jonathan remained, speaking to teachers, shaking hands with students. He didn't act like a celebrity or a CEO. He acted like a man who once sat in those same desks. As the sun dipped behind the stadium bleachers, Evelyn found her son near the old vending machines. "You came," she said softly. "You didn't have to." Jonathan looked at her, his voice gentle. "Neither did you. But we both did." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Evelyn looked around. "It feels different now." Jonathan nodded. "That's because people are listening." Finally. But behind them, unseen, a reporter captured their embrace. The image would soon go viral, not because of wealth or power or the spectacle of a helicopter, but because of the quiet strength in a mother's eyes. 3 weeks later, the nameplate on the principal's office door at Lincoln Ridge was removed. Marcus Whitfield had been formally dismissed following a unanimous decision by the district board, and the investigation into the school's disciplinary practices revealed years of inequality masked as policy. The audit exposed biased referral rates, unequal access to advanced courses, and a pattern of dismissing parental complaints from low-income families. Change didn't come overnight, but it began quietly, decisively. An interim principal was appointed, Mrs. Langley, a veteran teacher known for her compassion and backbone. On her first day, she met with students and staff in the auditorium. "This school doesn't need to be perfect," she said, "but it needs to be just." The applause was genuine. Evelyn Carter never returned to Lincoln Ridge as a parent. Caleb was transferred to a private school scholarship, fully covered by the Carter Foundation. But she did return one more time, this time as a guest speaker. Mrs. Langley invited her to address the senior class on resilience and dignity. Standing at the same podium where her voice once wasn't welcomed, Evelyn looked out at rows of students, many of whom had only heard rumors about the day the helicopter landed. Her voice was steady. "Some people will look at you and decide who you are before you ever open your mouth. They'll call it professionalism or discipline or standards. But none of those things mean anything if they aren't rooted in respect." She paused. "Don't let the world shrink you." After her speech, dozens of students waited in line to hug her, take photos, or simply say thank you. One girl, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "I'm going to college because of your son. But today I learned who made him who he is." Outside, Jonathan waited by the car, watching from a distance. He didn't want to steal the spotlight. "You did good, Mom," he said when she joined him. "I said the truth," she replied. "That's all we can give the world, isn't it?" He nodded. "That and how we treat people." They drove away from Oakwood slowly, the school growing smaller in the rearview mirror, but never insignificant. It wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about memory and how it shapes the future. And sometimes, the future lands louder than anyone expects. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end. It means a lot. Now tell me, where in the world are you listening from?